everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about two important questions that I had before I majored in music. What on earth is a studio, and what on earth is a jury? So I recently completed my first year at Conservatory as a violin performance major. Now, as you guys know, I didn't always grow up knowing that I was going to do music. I didn't go to a pre-college or anything for music. If you guys want to know the full story, I will link that in the description, but basically, I had heard a lot of these terms thrown around like studio class, jury, studio, this girl's in my studio, oh, I'm gonna go to my teacher's studio, I have my jury coming up. Like, I would hear these terms and have not a clue what my music major friends were talking about for the longest time. Even after I stepped foot onto the college campus, the conservatory campus, I still didn't really know what a jury was. And these were just like foreign terms tossed around, so I thought I would just make a quick video kind of explaining what those things are, at least in the music school or conservatory context. So for starters, let's talk about studio. I know that art majors have a different studio meaning, like when they say studio, they mean something totally different. Another misconception for the word studio in terms of music conservatory context is like you think of a recording studio or like, yeah, mostly just like a recording studio or an art studio. I feel like those are the two main contexts that you usually imagine the word studio used in, but in music school, or at least in my classical music field, when we say studio, we mean basically everyone with the same teacher. So for example, I'm a violin performance major, right? So I'll use myself for an example. I have one main violin teacher. He is my private teacher for all purposes. Like, I go see him once a week. It counts as a class. It actually counts as 4 credit hours, in case you didn't know, at least at my school. One major lesson basically means that's like your major. So like my violin performance major, that would be considered 4 credit hours at my school. My professor, my violin professor, I'm going to study with him for all 4 years. I'm going to take weekly lessons with him, private lessons, one-on-one lessons, and that's how I'm going to get better as a violinist. So basically, all the other students, all the other violin majors with my same teacher, that's what a studio is. For example, at my school, there's 3 main teachers, 3 main violin professors that are here like full-time on campus. Those would be considered 3 violin studios. So if you meet someone and you say, I'm a violin major, and they're like, oh, I'm also a violin major, you'd probably hear them say something like, oh, like, whose studio are you in? That would mean like basically, who is your teacher? I don't know why you can't just ask like, oh, who's your teacher? But like, if you hear people say that, that's what that means. So basically for the 3 professors at my school, they would each have their own studio. And studio just means all the students under the same professor. Instrument major professor, if that makes sense. In the same context, let's say I am a violin teacher and I have students. This doesn't even have to be in music school, but I'm just saying you probably hear these terms in music school. But let's say I'm a violin teacher, right? I do have a couple of students. That would mean I have a studio. That means that all of those students I have, whatever grade, wherever they are, those students are part of my studio. Basically, professor, students, all students under same professor equals studio. Other context you would hear this word is, I'm gonna go practice in my teacher's studio. So at my school, at least at a conservatory, our teacher has their own basically kind of like an office, not really, like it's just like a room where we have lessons, like it's their room. So we have lessons in that room, we have studio class in that room, which I'll explain in a second, but that's what my teacher's studio is. So he has his own designated room, it has a name on it, and we have our lessons there, and sometimes, you know, you can go practice in there. So usually the studios tend to be a bit nicer than the practice rooms, so oftentimes we can also reserve the studio, but in that case it would be a physical room. So now we have a studio is all the students within the same professor, and it's also a room, the physical room that those lessons happen in. Now the next thing is studio class. What is studio class? Studio class is basically where all the students of the same professor come together. So basically me and all of my peers with the same teacher, we would come together about once a week depending on the teacher. You'd come together and people will perform and they will be given feedback. So I know most studios, I can't speak for all of them, but not everyone performs every single time in studio. So the teacher will probably pick maybe like 1 or 2, 3 or 4, depending on, I don't know, the season, like if it's closer to a competition or something, there'll be more performances. But basically they'll pick a couple of students to perform in front of everybody in the studio. So after that student performs, the teacher will give feedback, The students will give feedback, like sometimes they go around in a circle and everyone has to say something. Yeah, so it's basically you perform in your studio class and you get feedback from your teacher and your peers. So if you ever hear a music student say, oh, I'm performing in studio class this afternoon or this evening, they mean that they're going to give a performance, usually dressed up in front of all of their studio mates. That can usually be quite a nerve-wracking experience because you guys all have the same teacher, you guys all understand the same things, your studio mates know what to look out for. Depending on how supportive your studio environment is, I know some can be a little bit more competitive than others. Some of them are really supportive. But either way, I feel like you're gonna feel a little bit nervous, and it's also a really great performance opportunity for the person performing. So that's often why our teachers will have us perform in studio class. Studio classes also count as part of your major lessons. So like I just said, your major lessons, at least at my school, are 4 credit hours. And so that's a really big deal. It's a really big portion of the classes at Conservatory, your credits. And oftentimes that teacher will have requirements for you to play like maybe once or twice a semester in studio class. But yeah, it's a performance opportunity, and it's oftentimes where you get to interact with your studio mates. So I hope that kind of clears up what a studio is. So next up, what is a jury? When I say jury, I'm like, oh, my juries are coming up, or I've heard that said. I would be really confused because the only context that I had heard the word jury used is in court. Are you on jury duty or something? Like, what does that have to do with music school? Like, are you gonna have a court hearing? Like, what's going on? Yeah, so jury actually has nothing to do with that. You are gonna be judged. Maybe that's why it's called jury. But basically, jury is an evaluation, usually once a year. And I would say, at least I'm gonna just say it for my school, but as a violin major, we have 2 juries in the time of our undergrad. So we would have one at the end of our freshman year, which is our first year in college, and then one at the end of our second year of college. And so what jury is basically you perform for 10 minutes straight. Your teacher usually picks your repertoire. It can be, I think there's requirements for some majors. Like I heard in the bass department, they had a lot of orchestra excerpts. I heard in the viola department, they require scales. But in my department, I think in the violin department, it's more like our teacher just picks what you play. So for my first jury, I actually played, or my teacher prepared on my repertoire list, 2 movements of Bach and 2 movements of the Wieniawski violin concerto that I had been working on. It's not that much for everybody. They didn't even ask for everything from me. I know one of my peers had 2 pieces, just 2 short pieces to play. So like it just depends on what your teacher picks for you. And the judges that will be evaluating you for a grade are all of the department teachers. So for me, all 4 of the violin professors at my school were the judges. For example, I know in the harp department, there's only 1 teacher, so it'd actually just be that 1 teacher evaluating you. Maybe in the viola department, I think there's 2 teachers. Like, I'm just giving examples, but like all of the department, all of whatever instrument department teachers will be there together, giving you feedback and basically giving you a grade, evaluating you. Now let me explain why jury is a pretty nerve-wracking experience. Before I even went to music school, I would hear people older than me that went to music school, they would be like, oh, my juries are coming up, I'm super nervous. That's often how I heard it being described. There are several reasons for that. Number one, kind of like an accumulation of everything you've learned during the year. You're playing in front of, in my case, teachers that you don't usually interact with, if at all. You usually, you have lessons with your teacher. You know your teacher really well. So that'll be one familiar face you have. But the other teachers, you don't really know them all the time. They're gonna be evaluating you with like basically more of an unbiased eye because they don't really know your progress and things like that. They just kind of see exactly what's in front of them in those 10 minutes. And it's nerve-wracking because it is an entire grade for just that grade. So it's a whole credit hour and it's 1 grade. So no matter what you do in those 10 minutes, that's all you get. There's no redemption. There's no like makeup opportunity, extra credit, like none of that stuff. It's just whatever grade you get, that's the grade you get on your report card. And again, it's just a performance. So you're performing in front of judges. That type of environment just tends to create nerves. Whereas again, like we talked about studio class, that can be nerve-wracking, but it can also not be, depending on, like, let's say you're friends with everybody in your studio class, then it's probably like more of a chill experience. But either way, for jury, the teachers tend to set it up pretty seriously, so you take it seriously. You have to dress up, usually dress nicely, and give a really great performance on which you are being evaluated. So that tends to be a lot of pressure. So finally, the last thing about jury is that I had said earlier, you have it twice during your undergrad, your freshman year, your first year, and your second year. You have one jury each. After that, your junior and your senior year, so your third and final year, third year, fourth year, those years you don't have a jury because you actually have a junior and a senior recital, which basically means you perform, I think it's 50 minutes or above straight of music. So in a junior or senior recital, you'll probably prepare like a concerto, some Bach, just some short pieces, some showcase pieces. I don't know, you can basically perform whatever your teacher says you're gonna perform. I was gonna say basically whatever you want, but your teacher has to approve. I'm not sure what requirements there are for junior and senior recital. I think it just depends on what your teacher decides is appropriate. But yeah, your junior and senior recital will be much longer. However, you will not be judged. I don't think it's like a grade. I think it's more like pass-fail situation. You either had one or you didn't. People's junior and senior recitals, they tend to go all out because that's your time to shine. That is like only you and your pianist on the stage. That's a moment where it's just you, you're the soloist, you're the main focus, and that's where you would invite all your family, your friends. I know a lot of people who had their family like fly in just for their junior or senior recital. Nowadays it's live streamed, so it's a bit easier. You don't necessarily have to fly, but it's a really big deal because it shows off what you've been learning not only in the past year, but like the past 3 years or the past 4 years. Senior recital is the biggest deal because it's your last recital before you graduate. It shows how much you've improved over the last 4 years with your teacher. People tend to get pretty emotional because you're also giving a final performance basically. And it also can be a really fun time because you have people in the audience that you've invited, like your friends, your family. Not really like a judge out there to evaluate you. It's more like you're giving a performance. You're just playing from your heart and you're playing for the people that you love and care about and that are there to support you. Okay, I know that was like a lot of talking. Yeah, I just wanted to make this video to clear up any confusions. Jury is not court duty, studio is not like a recording studio or anything. But yeah, I hope that this video helped you and that you enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.